All right, this is my first narration of one of my videos. And what I did this time, so that it wasn't as fast as the time-lapse setting records on my iPhone, is that I put it in regular video mode, and then I brought it into my Mac, and I have sped it up 8 times. So this canvas is obviously a large canvas, and I started out by playing with my soft pastels, and I believe these are my Sennelier soft pastels. I threw away the box, the top half of the box, so I don't remember, but I think these were my Sennelier soft pastels, and I just love the texture, I love the color. You can see that when I add water with my brush, it almost makes the effect like watercolor. And then after I've added water, I'm going back with some additional soft pastels, and the color is much darker. The intensity is greater because the canvas is still wet where I've applied water before. So then when I apply colors on top of it, it makes them darker. And then you can see me occasionally going back and adding some more water, even on top of the newly added pastel. And these are all pastels so far. I was trying something completely different, whereas I usually begin with acrylic and use my hands and smear things around. This time I'm solely using soft pastels, again using soft pastels, and then my paintbrush, an old paintbrush with just water to make the marks, to spread it around, to deepen and darken the color. And I really have fun with the texture and playing around with different textures, which is why pastels are so fun to me, because you get the texture of the canvas when they're dry, the texture changes when they're wet, and the texture changes when you're layering the pastels on top of each other, so that it's not just fields of color, it's layers of color, and then you have the interaction of those textures. Now I'm adding here some water-soluble oil pastel. The brand is Prima Marketing. I've also used the Portfolio brand, but the water-soluble oil pastels will react with water when water is applied on top. And then I am going back and adding even more soft pastel in kind of a golden yellow color, and I'm intentionally putting it on top of some of that water-soluble oil pastel. And then you can see me going back with water again, so then I get some water on the water-soluble oil pastel, on the soft pastel. I'm getting that interaction again with the under layers, and the texture changes, and I just really have a lot of fun kind of exploring what happens, with new marks. And now I believe I'm using a regular oil pastel, or maybe this is still the soft pastel. But at some point I go in with a neon oil pastel that's not water soluble. I think now this is the green water-soluble oil pastel that I'm layering on top of some of the yellow, on top of some of the blue soft pastel that's underneath. And then I do come in with some oil pastel, and I'm just making some scribbles. And I know that once I flip it up this way, I start working with a Neocolor 2 water-soluble crayon. It's kind of a pinky magenta color. And again, I'm playing around with the texture and how adding the different media, creates more texture and creates more depth in the piece. And when you see me step out of the frame, that's because I'm actually stepping back and standing back and looking at the piece from a distance, and then kind of feeling into where I want to add more marks. And I've decided to come back in with the kind of darker blue soft pastel that I used in the very, very beginning, and add some more shadow, I guess, some more depth to the piece that way. There wasn't really a conscious decision of what and why I was doing what I was doing. It's usually, with me, it's just intuitive, I feel like I need to do this next. So here's where I'm coming in with the neon oil pastel and making just some scribbly dynamic marks around the canvas, and it's just very intuitive. I feel called to work on a certain part of the canvas, and I just go straight there. I don't question it. I just make the marks. And that's kind of how my scribbly marks came about, because I found that when I make those kinds of marks, it's really easy for me to stay in the flow as opposed to analyzing what I'm doing and planning, what's going to come next, and, evaluating what happened before. So I really allow myself to make the decisions in the moment, and for them not even to be conscious decisions, but more a following of that intuitive impulse. And at this point, I'm getting out my pastels again. I picked up a lighter yellow soft pastel that I'm adding in short kind of scuffy marks, and that's kind of the mark that I began the canvas with, and a similar mark that I've been using with each of the different media as I'm going through. At this point, I'm using my paint pens. I have the Uniposca paint pens, and I felt drawn to the pink, and so what I'm doing is I actually push on the tip of the paint pen on my palette, which is just a glass from a picture frame that is taped around the edges to protect me, and then I am dipping my fingers into the pool of paint that comes out of that paint pen, and mainly just because I like that color, and I didn't want to use the tip of the paint pen because I have fine and super fine, and I really wanted that messy, organic texture of my fingerprint when I'm dipping it into the paint from the paint pen, which is very, very, very liquidy, and then smear it on the canvas. And then at this point, I do pick up some acrylic, some golden fluid acrylic in teal, and I toss it onto my glass picture frame palette, and then I'm just using my brush to kind of lightly drag it across various areas of the canvas. And initially I was feeling like I was going to use my spray bottle to get some of that drippy effect, but as I was going along, it felt like I just needed to have those kind of loose marks. Now at this point I'm using my red Uniposca paint pens, and all I'm doing to get these long red drips, and I really love the color of red that the Uniposca paint pen has. It's kind of like a pinkish red, and for some reason I was just really drawn to use that color. So I'm pushing the paint pen in while it's on the canvas, and then the paint, which is really more like an ink, I guess, but the paint squirts out and drips down the canvas. And then I'm coming in with kind of a leaf green soft pastel, and I'm making these little hash marks. It just felt like that's what I wanted to do. And then I tipped it over on its side and took a picture. So and that's kind of it. This painting feels like it might actually be complete, and if it is complete, this is one of the shortest paintings that I've ever done, especially for a large size. The real-time painting took about an hour. I didn't stop to dry anything in between. With the soft pastels, it was really quick to dry, even after I added the water, and so I'm really feeling good about this painting, and I feel like, it just might be done already. So I hope you enjoyed the narration and gave you some insight into my intuitive painting process, and thanks for watching.